Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we are unpacking one of the trickiest parts of building React applications, state management. There are tons of options, and what works for a small project can become a real headache as your team and app grows. I will show you what actually works at scale, why some tools fit certain jobs better than others, and the real-world mistakes to avoid. So, by the end of this video, you will know where React built-in state works and where it does not, how to pick between Redux, Zustand, Recoil and others, and how to organize all of these so your app stays easy to work on no matter how big is your team. In a tiny app, useState or React context can cover all the needs, but as your app grows, things get more and more complicated fast. Imagine dozens of components all needing access to the same data, and you're prop drilling, passing the state through layers of components, dealing with team members, stepping on each other's toes, and struggling to sync with the changes from the server. And if you don't set up things right, it's easy to end up with bugs, slow rendering, and burnt out teammates. So there are three main types of state in the React applications. First, local or component state. This is used for the state that is isolated in a single component. For example, a text in the form input or some toggle switch, and you can stick with useState or useReducer for it. It is simple and fast. But the problem is that if you need this state somewhere else, it is hard to share between components. And the next is a global state, the state that you can access app-wide. This is shared all over your app. It could be a UI theme or user data or feature flag and notifications. This state is usually managed with React context or the libraries such as Redux or Zustand. And the third and last type of state is a server state or remote state. This is the data that lives in your backend, and it's usually managed best with such libraries like React Query, SWR or GraphQL Apollo. And don't try to manage this data with the apps for local states such as Redux. It can create a mess and slow down your app really bad. But which tool to use for your React app? This is the question that we will try to answer today. So first, let's take a look at React Context. This is a built-in React feature, and it lets you share data across many components without passing your props through all the layers of the tree. This works well for global values that do not change often. For example, your theme or language and local, some basic user info, and maybe some app-wide settings that you prefer to store locally. React Context is good for these use cases because it keeps code clean and prevents prop drilling. But remember, you only should use React Context for the data that changes rarely. When you update your React context value, every single component that reads from this context will re-render. Doesn't matter how big is your component tree and how small is your change. And it's not a problem if that's what you want. Let's say if you change your theme, you want all your components to render. But if you put in a large and rapidly changing data, then the constant updates will mean a lot of re-renders and UI performance will drop massively. And debugging will also get much harder. So never use React Context for large and rapidly changing data. The state management libraries are much better choice for this. And also if your state is needed just in one or two components, consider just keeping it local as useState or useReducer. Use context only for the values that basically stay the same most of the time, and change will be user-driven, such as, for example, toggling light and dark theme or changing the language, and if this value is genuinely global and needed everywhere. Now let's talk about libraries that could be an alternative to React Context. And the first of them, the most popular in the React universe, is Redux. Redux is a state management library for JavaScript. It is widely used with React, but also compatible with other frameworks. It provides a centralized state for your app and makes state changes explicit, traceable, and easy to debug. Redux has its own downsides as well. For example, it requires a huge amount of boilerplate code, but there are libraries such as Redux Toolkit that helps us to deal with that boilerplate issues. So how does Redux work? There are a few key concepts you need to know. Redux is a single store library. All your global state lives in one place, even though you can split it into slices. And there are actions, events that describe what changed in your state. Another part of Redux ecosystem are reducers. Reducer is a function, the pure function, that describes how the state changes in response to an action. And to trigger the state change, you need to dispatch an action with a special function called dispatch. And there are also selectors, functions that access the needed part of a state. And Redux Toolkit enhances these basic Redux concepts with some utility functions that help to create all these actions, slices, reducers, and selectors in no time, avoiding that massive boilerplate. So what are the pros and cons of Redux? Let's start with pros. First of all, it is a centralized state management, so all your app state will be in the one place, so it is more predictable and easier to debug. And actions and reducers create an immutable and strict flow, so it prevents all the unexpected state mutations. Redux also provides a rich middleware ecosystem. You have middlewares for almost everything. Logging, analytics, reporting, side effect handling. Such libraries like Redux Thunk and Redux Saga are very well known in the community. With Redux, you also can do so-called time travel debugging. Redux DevTools let you go backwards in every action you do and debug your state changes on every step. And Redux provides a strong TypeScript support. It's really convenient to type actions, reducers, and selectors, because they all are just pure functions. And last but not least, Redux has a really large community and supported ecosystem. There are tons of tutorials, middlewares, and extensions. So what are the challenges then? Well, the complexity of Redux is high. Just to make one state change, you need to define actions, reducers, selectors, and understand how it all works together. And pure Redux also has a lot of boilerplate and repetitive code, but happily with Redux Toolkit, this problem is mostly solved. And Redux can be an overkill for small apps, so if your application does not need a large store, maybe think of some other libraries. And the learning curve is pretty high, so the new developers may struggle learning all the concepts of Redux. And the alternative for context and Redux is Zustand. Zustand is a small, fast and scalable library for React. It is designed to give you global state, but without complexity and boilerplate of Redux. Zustand uses hooks to provide an easy access to your state, so you don't need to wrap your code with providers. So why choose Zustand? The required setup is minimal. You can create your store with just one function and use a hook to access both states and actions. No complex reducers or middlewares are needed. And instead of one big global state, you can split your state into multiple simpler stores, keeping things more maintainable and targeted. It uses shallow comparison and selectors to trigger re-renders only when state that your component cares about changes. And also it has a great TypeScript support. The stand is fully typed and works great with TypeScript, making it easy to get autocomplete, type checking, and to make your code safer. That sounds great, but what are cons of the stand? Well, there are quite a few. First, if you don't know how to use it properly, you may create one giant store instead of few separate smaller ones. And over the time, it can get worse and lead to a hard to maintain code. And there is no such great dev tools as Redux offers. There are some basic dev tools, but they're not nearly as good as the Redux one. And while Redux enforces strict update patterns, Zustand is quite flexible. But this great freedom comes with great responsibilities, so your team should adopt their own clear conventions. There are two more state management libraries I want to talk about in this video, and it is Jotai and Recoil. Both these libraries were designed for React, but they take a different approach from Redux and Zustand. They are focused on atomic state, so instead of huge global store, you build your state out of small independent atomic pieces. And this is a huge win for highly interactive UIs. So when you should use Jotai or Recoil instead of classic Redux or Zustand? As I already said, it's a really good fit for highly dynamic UIs. If your app builds forms on the fly, lets users to add and remove widgets, or wires together a lot of moving parts, then Jotai and Recoil will be a great fit. They also work well for dashboards and real-time data visualizations. When your app shows real-time data charts or let users to customize what they see, you will benefit from this fine-grained control that these libraries offer. They are also really good for interconnected states. If changes in one part of your application should trigger updates somewhere else without re-rendering the whole page, then atom-based state is perfect for you. With Jotai and Recoil, you will update only things that need to be updated, and it means that your app won't slow down as it scales. And it's much easier to break down the logic into smaller parts. This is how these libraries are designed, and each team or each developer can independently work on their own atoms. And of course, both of these libraries support React hooks. That makes it really easy and natural to use with React. But when they may not fit, well, they can be an overkill for a simple needs. Again, if your app needs global state just to toggle theme or language, then just stick to React context. And the learning curve for Recoil and Jotai could be also quite steep. Teams who are new to this concept of atomic state may take some time to get used thinking into atoms and selectors rather than traditional big stores. So that's it. We covered the most popular approaches to the local app state, and in the next video I'm going to walk you through the ways how we can manage and sync our app with the server state. But if you want to know more details about any of these libraries we discussed today, then let me know in the comments below and I will make another video. And if it was useful for you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for my channel for more tutorials like this. Thank you and see you in the next video.